With part 2 of the Libre Solo Role Playing tutorial series. Here I'm going to walk you through the mission sheet and the action sheet, and also do a couple of kind of other wraps as we get ready to talk a little bit about how scenes work. So here's the action sheet in all of its glory. Just to show you what the different parts are, you have over here persons, which is from 1 to 100, different types of personalities. Within that, there's a subset called foes, going from 81 to 100. So that's part of the main table, but it's also its own side table. Here you have civilized qualities and wilderness qualities. Scene qualities are essential to the game, and they make up a lot of its goodness. We'll get into why later. But as you can see, for civilized scene qualities, it goes from 1 to 100, and 1 through 20 are what we call places, and then 81 to 100 are what we call rationales. Places are, well, places, it's pretty obvious, but rationales are what foes have or what groups of kind of generic people can have. It's the overall demeanor of that group of people or a group of foes, whether there's kind of an atmosphere in general, say in a tavern, that's welcoming and friendly, or if it's more like Mos Eisley, one of hate and anger, or it gives you just a general feel for what the place is about, or what the foe group is, what their activities are about and what they're feeling like. Then you have items, again, from 1 to 100. So that completes kind of your overall persons, scene qualities, items, and within that, places for wilderness and civilized, your foes, and your rationales tables. Again, some of those are subsets that you can either roll randomly when you're rolling your D100, or you can intentionally go to those tables to roll up a foe or a rationale or a specific place where action takes place. On the right here, you have your yes/no questions table, which also doubles up for skill checks. And in part 1, we showed you how to build a character where you could see that you get a +1, 0, or -1 for attributes. Your skills can vary. They'll generally be in like the 0 to +2 range. Here's where that matters. You look at your number of shifts when you do skill checks, if you're using the Libre Solo Role Playing RPG rule set, and then you can roll a percentile based on your basic skill, or that's where you start before you figure out other modifiers. So if your skill is a +2, all other things being equal, you're very likely to succeed, which means on a 0, 1 through 80 on percentile dice, you succeed. 81 to 100, you do not. With other modifiers, if your base skill is 0, you have a 50-50 chance of success, again, for a moderately difficult kind of generic skill challenge. Over here, you have some instructions for what we call plot stress. Down here, you have a table of unexpected events, which is what happens when you exceed your plot stress. Down here, you have some optional window dressing dice. This doesn't affect anything directly, but it's just to help serve as a guide. If you want to have some more ideas about what the scene looks like, you can roll 4 sets of D10s, and it'll tell you if something is maybe hillier or less, more or less level, more or less wet or dry, more or less cool or warm, and if there are more or fewer people, if it's a civilized scene. Over here, when you roll your foes, you can, or your allies, you can give them a culture or occupation and also a trait. All allies get traits, and that includes patrons and rivals, all those sort of recurring characters or persons of interest, which is their guiding personality or dominant personality in their interactions. And then finally over here, you have missions. Every story is a mission, even if it's something that your character decides to do on their own, that they happen to be told about. It's whatever kicks off the actual game. And on the next tutorial, we'll actually go into how a mission is set up and how a scene is set up. But that's pretty much the action table all in a nutshell. Over here, you have your mission sheet. Your mission sheet has places to put what the place is, what scene qualities there are, if there's a key person or item, so it's kind of your key pieces in the scene that you need to know, particularly scene qualities. Again, I'll stress it's very important. Then you have potential foes, potential goal you have for the scene, and the obstacles in the way for that goal. It's pretty much the skill checks that you intend to make if you have an obstacle scene, or your foe group if you have an encounter scene. Here's your plot stress, which you keep track as you go through. Whenever you ask a yes/no question or make a skill check, you add 1 to plot stress. And when you start or end a scene, you test plot stress, and yes/no questions test plot stress. We'll get into all that later. And then finally, window dressing and notes for the scene. Window dressing, again, is very important. These are things that you add to the scene that you think are of interest. They're not the magical scene qualities you rolled up, but it's more your own way to extrapolate and add things that will be useful for you to use in the scene, and any additional notes you might have for the scene. Down here, in case you are running an obstacle scene, you have your 3 boxes for skill successes and 3 boxes to ask for trouble, and then to check off whether or not you manage to get meaningful success for the scene. Meaningful success is what drives the story forward. You're going to, at the outset of a story, decide how many meaningful successes you need to resolve the scene. For your starting stories, make it 2. That's a pretty good way to get a story that might be as short as 20 minutes or as long as an hour and a half or so. But that's where you decide if you fulfill those meaningful successes by having that many scenes where things work out for you. You then manage to narrate the story with a positive outcome where your character gets paid, they get full experience, and they get whatever other ancillary benefits they might have from succeeding in that story. Or if they don't succeed, then you have a negative outcome, which is all the things that get wrong, you don't get paid, and just all things are bad. Here are lists for recurring patrons, persons of interests, and other sort of pieces that you want to keep track of, and also of allies and groups. So that just gives you kind of a general table of where to put things in case you need to keep hold of or keep track of who is what, where in the mission. And then down here you have something called structured questions. That's something pretty special. It's meant to be sort of a guiding dialogue set of requests that your character can make. So you'll refer to that whenever you have a dialogue with either a person of interest or a patron or ally, or with a foe group. And again, we'll get into these things later. But that's a quick walkthrough of what the mission sheet and the action sheet have on them, and how this area of shifts relates to skill checks if you're using the RPG rule set. So in part 3, we'll actually show you how to start up a scene and walk through a little bit of that.